Chapter 13. A Lick of Paint. Time had passed, and Dalton hadn't had any more trouble from Brad Wesley, from his dumbass nephew Pat McGurn, or from any of his goons. He was beginning to think that maybe things had settled down. The Double Deuce had been closed for a couple of days for its internal refurbishment, Dalton telling Tillman that he thought it was time, and the staff were now ready to keep the new lick of paint looking fresh, that they'd keep the blood off the walls in here at least. Dalton had walked in on Carrie Ann singing on the stage one day during the closure when she thought nobody was looking. He thought she was pretty good, and he'd managed to convince her to give it a go in front of the paying customers. Tonight was the grand reopening, and she was up on stage now, with its new blue neon Double Deuce sign and the chicken wire cage finally removed, belting out "Knock on Wood" while Cody and his band provided the music. Dalton was back at the bar. The new padding that lined the edge of the wooden surface was certainly more comfortable to lean against than the old, broken, duct-taped effort. He felt the most relaxed he'd been in the club since he'd first arrived, but he knew that it would only take one little problem to spoil the mood. Then one little problem walked over. Dalton had met Denise his first night at the Double Deuce, only back then he didn't know her name, remembering her as Vodka Rocks. She'd been in quite a few times since then, always with friends, always popular, and always staring at him like he was the new toy that she just had to have. People had warned Dalton to be careful with her, because she belonged to Brad Wesley. He didn't agree with the choice of words, but that was what they'd said. Tonight, she was wearing a blue dress that was similar in design to the first one he remembered seeing her in, only that one had been white. The body-clinging material accentuated her curves in all the right places, and she'd clearly spent a lot of time on her hair and makeup before heading out. She walked straight up to Dalton and ran her hand, complete with expensive fake nails, up his arm. He turned back to the room, to his job. "Why won't you look me in the eye, Dalton?" she asked sweetly. "I'm shy," he told her, but looked at her face to face like she wanted. She rubbed her body up against his and asked, "Would you be shocked if I said, 'Let's go back to my place and fuck'?" When he didn't reply, she flashed her pearly whites with a sultry smile. "It ain't gonna kill you," she reassured him. "You know, you might even like it." Dalton didn't doubt that he might, but he wasn't interested. Denise was a good-looking woman, and clearly aimed to please. But Dalton preferred his women to be intelligent. Like the doc, he thought, though he hadn't heard from her since that night she'd patched him up at the hospital. A strong hand grabbed Denise's arm from behind and pulled her roughly away from Dalton. Jimmy stepped forward and placed himself between the pair, staring Dalton dead in the eye. "Say goodnight, Denise," he ordered the woman, without taking his eyes off the cooler. He pushed her away and followed her to the door. Dalton shook his head and wondered where Wesley's chief enforcer had appeared from, and what he was doing there. A few minutes later, he got his answer. Jack had walked over to stand next to him, nodding at Carrie Ann on the stage and remarking, "I didn't know she could sing," when 4 goons walked in through the main door. Dalton knew trouble when he saw it. "Right boot," he warned Jack, noticing the glint as one of the club's overhead lights caught the edge of a blade embedded in the toe of the lead man's cowboy boot. "Got it," said Jack, then followed Dalton over to the door. Soon they were flanked by Hank and Younger, evening the odds. Dalton was pleased at how well the bouncers were now working as a team. "Sorry, we're closed," Dalton told the 4 men before they could get further than the entranceway. Their leader, the one with the blade in his boot, pointed around the crowded club and asked, "Then what are all these people doing here?" Dalton made a show of looking around, as if to confirm what he thought. "Drinking and having a good time," he said. "Well," said the leader, putting on a big fake smile. "That's why we're here." As he finished the last word, he threw up a kick with his right leg, hoping to catch Dalton by surprise with the razor. Dalton saw the move coming and caught the man's foot on the way in, yanking his ankle back the wrong way with a crunch. "You're too stupid to have a good time," he told him flatly, then tilted the man backward towards the doors. His balance gone, the thug fell with a thump to the hard floor, but Dalton kept hold of his leg, dragging him by his foot and taking it outside. He saw that the other 3 bouncers had started in on the rest of them as he went. Outside, after he hauled the troublemaker down the steps, he kicked him in his other knee to make sure he wasn't getting back up again soon, or at least that he wouldn't be much good if he did. Then he pulled off the man's rigged boot and lobbed it up onto the roof, well out of the way of anyone else that might want to use it. When he turned around, Dalton saw that there was now a 3-on-3 brawl going on around him out front, with a crowd of customers quickly gathering to enjoy the show. Hank, Jack, and Younger were doing okay, but the sooner this ended the better, especially with the growing audience, so Dalton decided to lend a hand. He headed confidently into the fray. A few punches, kicks, and knees later, and the 4 double-deuce bouncers were standing victorious over the 4 intruders. The biggest of them now regaining his feet and dragging his leader up off the floor. "Son of a bitch!" the one booted man called as he was helped away. Dalton stood beside Jack, who was panting, with his hands on his hips, but a smile on his face. Not too worse off for a few new bruises and a swollen lip. "Give me the biggest guy in the world," Dalton told him. "You smash his knee, he'll drop like a stone." Jack chuckled acknowledgement, and Dalton slapped him on the back as he headed inside. Dalton knew that not fighting was always better than fighting, but he also knew that if you had to fight, it was always best to win. It was good for the Double Deuce team to see what they could achieve when they worked together and listened to his advice too. He was happy about that, but in the back of his mind something was telling him that tonight's victory might come with a price down the line. It was then, as the crowd around the door parted, that Dalton spotted the doc standing there watching him. She was wearing a tight-fitting red and white checkered dress, and wearing it with a lot more class than Denise ever could. Her glasses were off, her hair was hanging down, and she looked just as beautiful as Dalton had imagined she would. Then he remembered his efforts at impressing her at the hospital, talking about philosophy and saying, "Nobody ever wins a fight." And here he was with another man's blood on his bruised knuckles. Again. He half expected her to turn and walk away. But she didn't. He walked slowly over to her, and she leaned herself back against one of the big wooden posts at the front of the club, and waited. Damn, she looks good, Dalton thought. "Hi," he said simply when he got to her. "Hi," she said in return. "So, you looking for somebody?" he asked her with a smile. "You," she replied. Dalton was happy with that answer.